Well, hello everyone. I hope you're having a great day today. Welcome to Friday's edition of Take Five. All week long, we have been studying the subject that we have titled When God Says No. And we've been looking at the different reasons that God actually does say no. Now, there are many. We could really stretch this thing out and just keep talking about it on it next week, but I really don't think there's no reason to do that. I think by this point, if you've been paying attention to the scriptures and if you've really been letting the Holy Spirit speak to you, you should understand by now that it is a fact. God does say no sometimes, and it doesn't mean that He's angry with us. It doesn't mean that we're on the wrong side of His mercy or anything like that. It just sometimes you need to say no, and that's what no means. Don't read into it. It doesn't mean anything else. It just means no, and we've got to learn that. Even coming from God, we've got to learn that. So we've looked at a couple of different things about the reasons that He'll say no. Number one, that we learned that God sometimes says no because He has a different plan. His ways are so much higher than our ways, as high as the heavens are above the earth. Mankind has never been able to measure the vast expanse of space. And so we have no idea of knowing how high, if it's possible to even say it that way, space actually goes, or how deep space actually goes. And God said, that's how much higher my ways are than yours. So sometimes He says no because He has a different plan. Number two, sometimes He says no because He has a better plan. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, every time God has a plan, it's better than the one that I've got. But there are just times when the things that we might plan to do would seem okay, and they might even be beneficial. But sometimes God has a better plan than that, and we need to learn to listen to His no. It doesn't mean He's rejected us. It just means He wants to do something better in and through our life. And then yesterday we talked about Paul, and we learned that sometimes God says no because it's good for us. When God told Paul no 3 different times, Paul was praying about that thorn in the flesh being removed, and God told him no 3 different times. Paul quit praying about it. He didn't ask about it anymore because he knew that God was wiser than him, and he knew that God was going to do something great in his life. In fact, God's response was every time, my strength is made perfect in your weakness because my grace is sufficient for you. So God was trying to do something in the life of Paul and strengthen him through his hard time, and He was giving him enough grace during his hard moments to endure that. I love Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse number 25. It's one of my favorite passages. The Bible is actually talking about Asher and some of his sons there. But when God's talking about Asher, He said, as your days are, so will your strength be. And I love that, to know that basically God is looking at my life and saying, whatever is in my day, whatever comes my way, that's the strength, that's the grace that God's going to give me. That's what He was telling Paul. My grace is sufficient for you. And so sometimes that no is absolutely good for us. The last one I'm going to give you today, it's real short, it's not going to take long, but it is, I think, the most powerful one out of all of these. Sometimes God says no because He sees a bigger picture. Our vision, our sight, our understanding, it's limited. We cannot see and we cannot know what God sees and knows. And so we don't see the picture that God sees. And so sometimes God has to say no because He sees a bigger picture. I'll use Jesus, if you'll permit me, and won't think that I'm, lost my mind here. Verse 7 of Hebrews 5, the Bible's talking about the priesthood of Jesus there and His earthly ministry and the things that He suffered. And here's what the writer, who I believe is Paul, here's what he says. In the days of His flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplication with loud cries and tears to Him, that's God, who was able to save Him from death, and He was heard because of His reverence. Now we hear God telling us through His Word that He heard the prayers of Jesus. When Jesus cried out, the Bible said, with prayers and supplication, loud cries and tears, He cried out to the God who was able to save Him from death, and God heard Him. But God said no. He had to go to the cross. And Jesus, being fully God and fully man, knew that. And that's why He prayed what He prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane when He said, Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. I don't want to have to endure this, but nevertheless, not my will, yours be done. And so Jesus could have prayed and called for heaven to send all of the angels at His disposal to come and deliver Him and pull the nails from His hands when He hung there, and could have delivered Himself from that awful agony. All He had to do was speak the word. But He knew the mind of God. He knew the will of God. He knew God said, no, this has got to happen. And so Jesus endured all of that agony. And here's why this was a good no. Because God saying no to Him and causing Him to still have to go through that cross made it possible for you and me to be saved today. There was a bigger picture than any of us could have ever imagined. Now, if it would have been me, if I would have been Jesus, I would have prayed till I was delivered. I wouldn't have worried about everybody else. I would not have been concerned about that. But He accepted God's no, and He knew, even though His flesh wanted to avoid that, He knew in His heart, He knew in His spirit what He had come to do. He knew what His mission was. And so God's no this time comes because He sees the bigger picture, and because God said no when Christ cried out to be delivered and said, no, you must go through that cross if mankind is to be saved. It made it possible for you and me to be saved and delivered today. So you see, friends, no's not really always that bad. So think about these things as you get into the weekend, and recognize that these no's that God gives us sometimes, it's not because He's angry. It's not because He's frustrated. Sometimes God has to say no because He's got a different plan. He's got a better plan. The no's good for us. And sometimes He says no because He sees the bigger picture. Hey, I've got to get out of here. It's been good being with you this week. I look forward to worshiping with you on Sunday, and then we'll be right back here Monday for a brand new series of Take 5 devotion. Until then, have a great weekend. And hey, remember this, trust the Lord. He will never fail you.